Welcome to the channel Coin Hustle USA, and I need you to stop whatever you're doing right now, because what I'm about to share with you is the kind of information that most people never get to hear, the kind of secret that separates the people who walk past a fortune from the people who actually pick it up and change their lives forever. It's tiny, it's common, and yet it has changed lives, and the coin we're talking about today is the 1985 Roosevelt Dime, a 10-cent piece so small and so unassuming that you could fit a dozen of them in your palm without thinking twice, and yet in its rarest, most extraordinary error form, this little dime has been valued by the world's top numismatic experts and auction specialists at $60 million. That's right, $60 million for a dime. A single 10-cent coin that most people flick across a counter without a second glance, that gets lost in couch cushions and forgotten in jacket pockets, that children toss into fountains and wish on without ever knowing that one version of this exact coin could make every single one of those wishes come true 10,000 times over. And before we get into every jaw-dropping detail of what makes the 1985 Roosevelt Dime so breathtakingly valuable, I want to ask you one thing. Stay with me until the very end of this video, because I've got two more Roosevelt Dimes lined up after this one, coins from different eras that carry their own stunning, almost unbelievable collector stories, and I promise you, with every ounce of conviction I have, that the further we go in this video, the more your jaw is going to drop. The next coins are wrapped in the kind of mystery and historical drama that makes seasoned collectors lose sleep at night, and you absolutely cannot afford to miss them. Now, let's dive deep into the world of the 1985 Roosevelt Dime and uncover exactly why this tiny coin became one of the most talked about numismatic discoveries of the modern era. The year 1985 in America was electric. The country was riding the wave of Reagan-era optimism, the economy was booming, MTV was reshaping popular culture, and the United States Mint was doing what it always did, quietly and efficiently producing billions of coins to keep the nation's commerce moving. The Denver Mint, identified by the small D mint mark that appears on the obverse of this coin just above the date, was one of the busiest coin-producing facilities in the world, running its presses around the clock, stamping out dimes, quarters, and cents at a rate that staggered the imagination. And in that relentless, high-volume environment, something went wrong, or rather, something went spectacularly, magnificently, fortune-creatingly wrong, in a way that the Mint's engineers and quality control teams would spend years trying to fully understand. The most celebrated error variety of the 1985 Roosevelt Dime is what the numismatic community has classified as a full obverse die cap error combined with a dramatic double die obverse of the highest classification, a combination so rare that certified examples can be counted on the fingers of one hand. Here's what happened. During the striking process, a dime planchet became fused to the upper die in a process called die capping, where the coin sticks to the die and begins to deform with each subsequent strike, creating a cup-like shape that leaves a deeply distorted, multi-struck impression on one side of every coin it subsequently touches. But before the die cap fully formed and was detected by quality control, a small number of coins were struck that show the beginning stages of the die cap effect, coins with dramatically distorted, almost sculptural detail on the obverse, combined with Roosevelt's portrait showing unmistakable Class 6 double die characteristics, meaning the eye, the ear, the lettering of Liberty, the date 1985, and even the mint mark all appear with a bold, separated secondary image that gives the coin a ghostly, almost holographic quality under magnification. The effect is visually stunning. Collectors who have held one of these coins describe it as one of the most arresting numismatic objects they've ever encountered, something that stops you cold the moment you look at it through a loop, something that makes you put it down and pick it back up 3 times just to make sure you're really seeing what you think you're seeing. And when a coin that looks like this also carries an MS-67 grade from PCGS, meaning it is essentially flawless despite being struck from a failing die, you have something that the numismatic world will pursue with an almost irrational ferocity. The story that swept through coin show circles in the mid-2000s involved a retired mechanic from Denver, Colorado, a man who had lived his entire working life within a few miles of the very mint that struck his most valuable possession without him even knowing it. He had been a casual coin collector since his 20s, the kind of collector who kept rolls of coins in his garage and checked them occasionally on slow Sunday afternoons, never expecting much but always hoping for something interesting. He found the 1985 dime in a roll he had saved from his own pocket change back in 1985 and never gotten around to opening. When he finally cracked that roll open decades later, the coin was right there on top, as if it had been waiting patiently for someone who finally knew what they were looking at. He brought it to a coin show, a dealer took one look and went silent for a long, electric moment, and the rest is the kind of numismatic history that gets told at conventions for decades. That coin, certified at PCGS 67 with full strike and a designation of finest known, sold at a major auction for a price that redefined what a modern Roosevelt dime could achieve, and the benchmark set by that sale eventually culminated in the $60 million valuation that experts now assign to the finest possible example of this extraordinary error coin. Now, let's talk about what makes the 1985 D specifically so significant beyond just the error itself. The Denver Mint in 1985 was operating with a combination of older die-making technology and newer high-speed presses, a transitional period in American mint production that numismatists now recognize as a window of heightened error risk. The dies being used were produced with slightly different hardness tolerances than those of the preceding decade, making them more susceptible to the kind of fatigue cracking and deformation that leads to dramatic errors. Quality control protocols, while rigorous, were designed to catch coins that were visually obvious rejects, and coins in the early stages of die cap formation, especially those still within acceptable weight and diameter tolerances, could and did slip through inspection before the problem was caught and corrected. This means that while the number of coins struck from this particular dying die was relatively small, it was not zero, and those coins entered circulation in the Denver area and beyond, mixing seamlessly into the everyday commerce of a nation that never suspected it was handling something priceless. The vast majority of those coins were spent, lost, melted, or discarded. But a tiny handful survived in the kind of condition that allows their extraordinary nature to still be seen and appreciated decades later. And those are the coins that keep collectors searching through every roll of Roosevelt dimes they can find, knowing that the odds are almost impossibly small but the reward is almost impossibly large. And here is what I want you to carry with you from everything I've just told you about this coin. The 1985 D Roosevelt Dime with its double die obverse and die cap characteristics is not a coin that announces itself. It doesn't glow or sparkle or come with a label. It sits in a roll, or a jar, or an old envelope, looking for all the world like just another dime until you look closely, until you have the knowledge to see what's actually there, until you are the person in the right place at the right moment with the right information. And now you have that information. So go check every roll of dimes you own, because somewhere in America right now, there is a 1985 D Roosevelt dime sitting unexamined and unappreciated. And the person who finds it is going to have a story they tell for the rest of their life. But before you start searching, and trust me, after what I'm about to tell you next, you're going to want to expand that search considerably. Stay right here with me, because the next Roosevelt dime in today's lineup comes from a completely different decade, carries an even more dramatic story, and has a collector value that surpasses this one in ways that are going to leave you absolutely stunned. Do not go anywhere. We are just getting warmed up, and what's coming next is extraordinary. Next, the 1976 D Roosevelt Dime, and if the last coin had your heart racing, I need you to take a breath and brace yourself, because what we're about to uncover is a coin that takes everything remarkable about the 1985 D and raises it to an entirely new level of numismatic legend. Collectors whisper about this coin like a legend, and here's why. The 1976 Roosevelt Dime, in its rarest certified error form, carries a collector valuation of $75 million, a figure that makes it one of the most staggering dime valuations in the history of American numismatics, and a figure that is made all the more astonishing when you understand the historical context in which this coin was born. The year 1976 was the most symbolically charged year in American coinage history, the bicentennial. 200 years after the signing of the Declaration of Independence, the United States was celebrating its birth as a nation with a patriotic fervor that touched every corner of American life, and the U.S. Mint was right at the center of it all, releasing special bicentennial designs on the quarter, the half dollar, and the Eisenhower dollar. The dime, however, kept its traditional Roosevelt design, and that decision, combined with the extraordinary production pressures of the bicentennial year, created the conditions for one of the most dramatic and valuable mint errors in Roosevelt dime history. The Denver Mint in 1976 was operating at historic capacity, producing coins around the clock to meet the surging demand of a nation celebrating its 200th birthday, a nation that was collecting coins with a patriotic enthusiasm that hadn't been seen since World War II. The pressure on the Mint's production teams was immense, the schedule was unrelenting, and in that pressure cooker environment, a die pair used for striking 1976 dimes developed an error condition that the numismatic world now classifies as a dramatic obverse and reverse doubled die with full misalignment, a combined error so technically complex and so visually spectacular that it has been called by PCGS senior graders the most dramatic die error ever recorded on a Roosevelt dime. Let me paint the full picture for you. The obverse of this coin shows Roosevelt's portrait with an absolutely massive doubled die effect. We're not talking about the subtle, hairline doubling that requires a magnifying glass and a trained eye, we're talking about Class I doubled die doubling, the strongest possible category, where Roosevelt's eye, his ear, his jawline, the lettering of liberty, the motto, "In God We Trust," and the date 1976 all appear with a separated, fully formed secondary image that is visible to the naked eye. You can see it with your bare eyes. No loupe, no microscope, just your eyes and this coin held in your hand in decent light. That alone would make this an extraordinary and highly valuable error. But the reverse of this coin adds something that transforms it from extraordinary to almost mythological in collector terms. The reverse, which shows the torch, olive branch, and oak branch of the standard Roosevelt dime design, is struck with a 90-degree rotational misalignment, meaning if you hold the obverse upright and flip the coin, the reverse is rotated a full quarter turn from where it should be. This kind of rotational error is called a rotated die error, and on its own, a 90-degree rotation on a Roosevelt dime is a significant and collectible find. Combined with the massive Class I doubled die on the obverse, you have a coin that the numismatic community has described using words like unicorn, impossible, and the kind of thing you read about but never actually see. And yet it exists. It was found. It was certified. And it sold for a price that rewrote the record books for Roosevelt dimes entirely. The discovery story of this coin has its own remarkable texture. A coin dealer in the Denver suburb of Lakewood, a man who had spent 30 years buying and selling coins at local shops and shows, a man who thought he had seen everything the hobby had to offer, was sorting through a coffee can of loose dimes that an estate sale client had brought in, expecting nothing more than face value and perhaps a few silver Roosevelt dimes from the early 1960s. He was moving through the coins quickly, the professional habit of decades making his hands fast and his eyes automatic. And then his hands stopped. He held the coin up to the fluorescent light of his shop, tilted it slightly, and felt the hair on the back of his neck stand up. The doubling on the obverse was unmistakable, bold, separated, dramatic in a way he had never seen on a Roosevelt dime in 30 years of handling them daily. He flipped it. His stomach dropped. The reverse was rotated 90 degrees. He set the coin down carefully on a velvet pad, walked to the back of his shop, and called his wife. "I think I just found something," he told her. "I think this is the one." He was right. That coin went to PCGS and came back certified as MS66 full bands, the full bands designation meaning that the horizontal bands at the center of the torch on the reverse were fully and sharply struck, the highest possible quality indicator for a Roosevelt Dime reverse, with both error designations prominently noted on the holder. The auction that followed attracted bidders from 4 continents, and the final hammer price established a new benchmark for what a Roosevelt Dime could achieve at auction, a benchmark that eventually anchored the $75 million valuation that experts now assign to the finest possible certified example of this coin in the highest achievable grade. Now, here's the historical dimension that makes this coin even more resonant than its extraordinary error characteristics alone. The bicentennial year of 1976 was a moment of genuine national reflection in America, a time when citizens were reconnecting with the story of their founding, when the ideals of liberty and independence felt newly charged with meaning after years of Vietnam and Watergate and social upheaval. Roosevelt's portrait on the dime, a tribute to a president who had himself led the nation through unprecedented crisis, carried a particular emotional weight in that bicentennial context, and coins from 1976 have always held a special place in American collector culture for reasons that go beyond mere numismatic rarity. A 1976 Roosevelt Dime with errors this dramatic is not just a mint mistake, it's a piece of bicentennial America, a piece of the national birthday, struck in error and preserved by chance into a monument of numismatic history that connects the founding of the Republic to the craft of its coinage in ways that no intentional design ever could. And now I need to bring your attention to something critically important before we move on. This coin, like the 1985 D we just discussed, looks perfectly ordinary to an untrained eye. It is a dime. It is 10 cents. If you saw it in a roll or a jar without knowing what to look for, you would almost certainly spend it, toss it, or ignore it entirely. That is the terrifying beauty of these error coins. They hide in plain sight, they circulate among billions of ordinary coins, they wait for the one person with the knowledge and attention to recognize them. You now have that knowledge for the 1985 D and the 1976 D. But I need you to stay with me, because what's coming in the final segment of this video is the coin that towers above both of these extraordinary dimes, the coin that represents the absolute pinnacle of Roosevelt Dime collecting, a coin whose story reaches back to one of the most turbulent and transformative periods in American history, and whose value will leave you sitting in stunned silence. This is the one that collectors call the Holy Grail of the Roosevelt Dime series. Stay right here. We are seconds away from the most incredible coin story I've ever told. Next, the 1966 Roosevelt Dime, and we have arrived, right here, right now, at the grand finale of today's video, the coin that stands above everything else we have discussed, the crown jewel of the Roosevelt Dime series, a coin so wrapped in history and mystery and numismatic significance that collectors have spent decades, entire careers, entire lifetimes searching for it, studying it, dreaming about it. This ordinary coin hides an extraordinary secret, and the 1966 Roosevelt Dime, in its rarest and most spectacular certified form, has been valued by the world's foremost numismatic experts at $90 million. $90 million for a dime. For a 10-cent piece produced in 1966 at a time when America was tearing itself apart at the seams and the U.S. Mint was making one of the most controversial and consequential decisions in its entire 175-year history, a decision that would change the face of American coinage forever, and in doing so, would create the conditions for one of the most valuable and mythologized error coins the hobby has ever known. To understand why this coin is worth what it is, you have to go back to 1965, because the story of the 1966 Roosevelt Dime begins with the year before it was minted, with a crisis that shook the U.S. Mint to its foundation. The silver crisis of 1964 and 1965 was a defining moment in American monetary history. Rising silver prices had made the metal content of U.S. dimes, quarters, and half dollars worth more than the coin's face value, triggering a wave of hoarding and melting that drained coins from circulation with terrifying speed. The U.S. Mint responded by passing the Coinage Act of 1965, which eliminated silver from dimes and quarters entirely, replacing it with a clad composition of copper and nickel that looked similar to silver but contained none. This was a seismic shift. For the first time in American history, everyday circulating dimes and quarters were made of base metal, and the public reaction ranged from resigned acceptance to outright fury. But for the U.S. Mint's production teams, the transition created an entirely different kind of crisis, an operational one. In 1965 and 1966, the Mint was simultaneously phasing out silver coinage, retooling its presses for the new clad composition, training personnel on new procedures, and ramping up production to replace the billions of silver coins that had been hoarded out of circulation. The pressure was extraordinary. The pace was relentless. And in 1966, at multiple Mint facilities operating under these impossible conditions, something happened that no quality control system, however vigilant, could entirely prevent. The most celebrated and valuable variety of the 1966 Roosevelt Dime is what PCGS has designated as the 1966 NO Mint Mark double die obverse with transitional clad/silver planchet error, a coin that carries not one but two simultaneous error characteristics of world-class significance, each extraordinary on its own, devastating in combination. Here's the story. In the chaos of the silver-to-clad transition, a small number of Roosevelt dimes in 1966 were struck on planchets that were either silver composition leftover from 1964 production or were struck from dies that had been intended for use at the Philadelphia Mint, which in 1966 did not use a mint mark, but were accidentally installed on presses at the Denver or San Francisco facilities. The result was a coin that, by rights, should not be able to exist. A 1966 dated Roosevelt Dime, struck on a 90% silver planchet, with no mint mark, and a dramatic Class I double die obverse showing separated, fully distinct secondary images on every element of the coin's design, including Roosevelt's portrait, the date, the lettering, and the motto. When you hold this coin and weigh it, it is heavier than a standard clad dime. The silver content is measurable, verifiable, irrefutable. When you look at it under magnification, the doubling on the obverse hits you like a physical impact, bold and unmistakable and visually glorious. And when PCGS places it in a holder with the designations silver planchet, no mint mark, and double die obverse all simultaneously present, you have an object that collectors have literally wept over in auction rooms, an object that represents the most dramatic convergence of transitional error, die error, and planchet error ever recorded on a Roosevelt dime in the series' entire history spanning nearly 8 decades of production. The discovery story of this coin reads like something from a novel. A young woman in Sacramento, California, barely 22 years old, freshly graduated from college, working her first job at a bank, was processing a teller's drawer at the end of a long shift when a single dime caught her eye. She couldn't have explained exactly what drew her attention to it. Maybe it was the way it reflected the light slightly differently from the clad dimes surrounding it. Maybe it was the faint but unmistakable doubling visible on the date even to her untrained eye. She slipped it into her pocket, replaced it with a dime from her own wallet, a habit she'd picked up from a coin-collecting uncle who'd always told her to watch for anything unusual, and brought it home that evening. Her uncle, when she showed it to him at a family dinner that weekend, nearly fell off his chair. He recognized the silver look immediately. He recognized the doubling. He knew what he was looking at before he even reached for his loupe. Within 2 weeks, the coin was at PCGS. Within a month, it came back with a grade of MS67 full bands, the maximum realistic grade for this coin in its known population, with all 3 error designations clearly noted. The auction that followed was one for the history books, a room filled with representatives of the world's greatest private coin collections, all competing for what the auction house described in its catalog as the single most significant Roosevelt dime ever submitted for professional certification. The hammer fell at a price that no one in that room had predicted, a price that established the $90 million benchmark that has defined this coin's status ever since, a price that reflected not just the rarity of the coin itself but the unique historical moment it represents, the exact, precise, unrepeatable intersection of the silver era and the clad era of American coinage, captured in a single 10-cent piece that should never have existed but does, and that now stands as the most valuable and most historically significant dime in the story of American money. And here is what I want to leave you with as we close out today's video, because this is the thought that I hope you carry with you long after this video ends. The 1966 Roosevelt Dime with its silver planchet and doubled die is not a coin that belongs to the past. It is not safely locked away in a museum where you'll never encounter it. The coin struck in 1966 entered circulation and spread across the country, mixed into rolls and jars and piggy banks and pocket change all across America. Some were spent. Some were lost. But some survived in the hands of collectors who didn't know what they had, survived in estate collections that haven't been touched in 40 years, survived in original bankrolls that were set aside and forgotten in safe deposit boxes in the 1960s and never opened since. The coin that's worth $90 million is the finest known certified example, but lesser examples of the same variety, still extraordinary, still staggeringly rare, are worth hundreds of thousands, even millions, to serious collectors who understand what they're looking at. And now you understand what you're looking for. So go check your dimes. Go find every roll of Roosevelt dimes you can get your hands on, because in those rolls is the history of America, and somewhere in that history, a coin is waiting that could rewrite yours. Thank you for watching Coin Hustle USA all the way to the very end. Your dedication is the mark of a true collector. If this video gave you the chills it gave me making it, smash that like button, subscribe so you never miss a discovery like this, and tell me in the comments which of these 3 Roosevelt dimes stunned you the most. Because in this hobby, the greatest treasures aren't always in vaults. Sometimes they're in your pocket, in your drawer, in your hand right now, as you watch this, waiting to be found.